trials right now, and a number of trials sponsored by a number of groups. Hopefully, within a reasonable period of time, we'll get information as to whether or not that's effective, both in the prevention as well as in the treatment. Those antibodies are directed against a component of the virus that is what's called the spike protein, and that protein is the one that binds to the now well-established receptor in your body for the virus, and that's a receptor called ACE2. There are a number of other studies that are not necessarily antibody studies, but studies that have an effect on the virus itself and its initial replication. In answer to a question that the chairman mentioned just a bit ago, is that there will be therapies that we will be giving, some for treatment early on and others for prophylaxis. And as we hope, as we get into the fall and winter, we'll have everything from small molecule treatments and prophylaxis to the kinds of antibodies that you're talking about. So there's a lot of activity going on to do that early in disease, both for prevention and for the treatment of early disease.
Well, I know that you've been doing a lot of serology testing and that individuals are presenting with antibodies. So out of the 5 types of antibodies that people are most likely to have, which ones do most recovers patients? Which ones do they show? And if one of these specific antibodies are present, does that make a difference in if the patient can be reinfected or not? Are they effectively immune, at least for some period of time? What kind of answers does this give us if you do have the presence of certain antibodies?
I'd love to give you a really precise, scientifically based answer, but the fact is, we don't know. Standard-wise, when you get an acute infection, you get an IgM antibody. As you go off in time and develop a more mature immune response, it becomes an IgG. There are subclasses of IgG, some more protective than others. The thing we don't know, Senator, that we will know in time, but it's going to take time to know it, is what the relationship between the neutralizing antibody and binding antibodies that don't neutralize, what is the relationship between the titer and the degree of protection, and what is the durability of protection? We've seen some puzzling things. We've seen people recover from COVID infection and find out they don't have very high levels of antibody. Could it be a cell-mediated response that got them through the illness? And some other individuals have very high levels, and we don't know how long those levels last. So we're getting there with regard to our knowledge, but it's going to take several more months to a year to really be able to definitively answer your question about the role of antibodies in protection following natural infection.
Well, building upon that, I'd like to ask this question then. We know that this virus affects, it's multi-organ. It can affect your kidneys, your lungs, your heart, producing strokes, all kinds of things, your digestive system, your sense of smell. So on the science that you're talking about in the antibodies, is the science of stopping the virus from causing harm the same regardless of which organ it attacks? And how do we help direct funding for the kind of research that you're going to need to look at this multi-organ attack of this virus, if you will?
This is a very perplexing virus because it's a respiratory virus and it gets in through the respiratory tract. If the virus stays in the respiratory tract and doesn't go systemic to involve other organs, that's good news because you don't get very sick. The other side of the coin is your antibody response is not as potent because when you get systemic involvement, invariably you will have a more potent and robust immune response. So many people, and probably the people who are the asymptomatic carriers, they have a reasonable titer of virus in their nasopharynx, but the virus doesn't go any other place in their body. People who get multi-system disease that get triggered by the virus, those are the ones that unfortunately get more sick, but also the ones that make a more potent immune response.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all being here today.
Thank you, Senator Rosen. Very interesting question. Senator Murray, do you have closing remarks?
I have one additional question, if I might, and then some closing remarks. I wanted to ask Admiral Gerard one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Despite some of the limited data, we do know that COVID-19 is infecting and killing Black, Latino, and Native American people at a much higher rate than white people. I want to ask you how HHS is going to adjust its response to reduce cases and deaths in communities of color, and specifically, can you commit to redirect some of the $14 billion that is in unspent funds Congress provided to address those disparities?
Let me answer the two parts of the question. First, as you know, and really appreciate your support, we've tried to focus our testing into high social vulnerability communities. So 70% of our over 600 pharmacy sites are in high SVI communities. That means racial and ethnic minorities, language disparities, socioeconomic. FQHCs, we've made a major push that the federally qualified health centers that take care of 1 out of 3 of those in poverty, over 1,300 of those are now offering testing. And of course, we're super excited about the award to Morehouse School of Medicine last week that has a large coalition to create a national infrastructure to reach minorities and underserved. So that's what we're really doing. And you know, my office, this is what we do on a daily basis, even without a pandemic. Your second question is, I don't commit the money. I certainly think we need continued investment in this area, continued significant investment in this area, that the $40 million is a down payment on how we could best reach the underserved community, but you're going to have to talk to OMB about how the money is spent.
Oh, well, actually, HHS oversees that, so we will ask them, but I think that's an important question. I'll keep following up and tracking that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of our witnesses taking the time to join us today to update our committee on the course of this pandemic and all of our efforts to respond to it. I hope we will continue to have an opportunity to hear from all of you, as well as other key administration officials about this, because the